Hi, everyone. Good afternoon from sunny Southern California, and good evening or good morning, depending on where you're living. I'm Astro Coach Amy. I'd like to welcome you. This is my 4th YouTube astrology series. Today, we're talking about what is Jupiter in Virgo. And for some of you, you may be new to Western sidereal astrology. That was my first show. So I invite you to check it out, and you can learn a little bit about this ancient and yet very relevant form of astrology that I use in my work with people so that you can be your greatest self. Today, we're going to be talking about Jupiter in Virgo. This is a 13-month cycle that began last month, so we have another year. And I thought this would be a great time to give you a heads up on how you can use these energies to make it a fantastic year for yourself. And midway through the show, we're actually going to take a bird's eye view at Roland's chart. Roland Tekayoka has been a tremendous mentor and business coach to me. And his reading is long overdue. So we're going to take a bird's eye view of how Jupiter is going to impact him this year to give you a little idea of that. And we're going to have some fun, and hopefully you're going to learn many things you had never even thought about. So first of all, Jupiter is one of the shorter cycles of what we call the outer planets. It generally takes 12 to 13 months to go through its sign in the zodiac, and then, for example, next year, the cycle began August 11th this year and will end actually on September 11th next year. So in other words, on September 12th, Jupiter will enter the air sign of Libra. And at that point, we'll talk about that. But what's important to know is that Jupiter does have a strong influence, although it doesn't have quite the heavy influence of the outer planets such as Neptune and Pluto, which go more slowly. But if you are prepared, this is another time when an ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. Now, this cycle will affect us all. It'll impact us as a society. It already has these last few weeks. And depending on your individual birth chart, it will, of course, have a slightly different impact upon you personally or on all of us. And each year, those influences change. So it might be a bigger influence for you this year, and perhaps next year it might be a little bit less when Jupiter goes into Libra. But it will impact all of us during this time. And so the question is, how can we help you utilize that? First of all, what does Jupiter in Virgo mean, and why should you care? That's probably a good question to start with. When Jupiter cycles occur, they emphasize things. They expand the energies, and they can also provide strong support. So let's look at how that can influence you and in what area this next year. Being that Jupiter is in Virgo, which is an earth sign, it means that for the next year, the earth signs of Virgo, Capricorn, and Taurus will all receive a little stronger influence. So if you have those in your chart, even if it's not your sun sign, but some other planets in those earth signs, it means you may have a little more of a boost in some aspects of your physical and material life. So we're going to look at that briefly. And also, Virgo has a lot to do with our health and our routines and our habits. And this is a really valuable and important year to raise your health and work routines up a notch. So if you're someone who is very casual about getting some movement, it might be a time to raise the notch and be more physically active and find ways to do that that are reasonable, not crazy. If your health routine is so-so, this might be a time to raise the notch. Drink more water, Perhaps include some kind of a drink, a green nutritional drink, something like that into your daily routine. So these things can make a tremendous difference in the next 6 to 12 months if you think of these as enhancing what you have and really improving what you might have. Now, there is a tendency this year, there can be, and that's why I want to say this at the beginning. For a lot of us, our material life, it sustains us. It's our housing, it's our earning, and of course, our physical body. So for most of us, what we see and what we touch is very important to us. I am only going to say to you that is absolutely true. Now, the important thing this year is going to be to keep your spiritual connection strong so that you have a higher quality of life in your material life, and to keep yourself in a healthy emotional state so that you can take advantage of it. We don't want you so exhausted as you're trying to make money or lose an extra pound that you're not able to be your best and greatest self. So there's definitely going to be a need to moderate and balance your emotional and spiritual life this year with this strong earth emphasis. Now, in astrology, there are places where the planets have greater strength and emphasis and places where they're a bit weaker. Jupiter in Virgo is not the strongest place in the zodiac for Jupiter. So there's a couple of different challenges, as we mentioned. One is the idea of staying balanced between your material and spiritual life. And the other one that's important is Jupiter was a very, very important god in the heavens. Jupiter is the god of the sky and is considered the god of thunder and considered the king of the gods. As some of you may know, in Roman mythology, they called him Zeus. As the sky god, we considered him what we call the divine witness. He was a witness to oaths, to promises, and to sacred trust, on which justice and good government depend. And that in itself is such a huge topic that we know, even looking with the election coming, we're probably going to be doing a show about that soon. But one of the things that Jupiter has a lot to do with is both politics and religion, interestingly enough. And some people with a very strong Jupiter in their chart, but also with some what we call challenging aspects or patterns. Some of you have met them, and they might be either political or religious fanatics. That is definitely one aspect of shall we say, a challenging kind of Jupiter. The other side of that would be someone who really would use some of these great energies from Jupiter or from Zeus to stand up for what's right, to be someone who really is a champion for people and for taking right action. And that's a very positive aspect of Jupiter. So sometimes people in the clergy, in law, have this is a strong part of their chart. Not necessarily the control aspect. We'll look at the Saturn aspect another time. Someone who might be, for example, in the police or the military. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the idea of the law, the justice, and that. And this is a very important aspect. And there's also the expansion of even someone who might be in marketing. This could be a good year for them as well, depending on how they use the energies. Now, one of the things we all know, and I'll just say this briefly, and then we're going to close this can of worms for now. But as a lot of us can see with the election year, and of course this lasts probably a couple of years, but especially this year, we can use this as Jupiter has gone into Virgo, which was just a month ago. A lot of us have seen this whole year quite intense extremes that I don't remember between what I'm going to call righteous and unrighteous behavior. in some of the election campaigns to an extreme that for me has been almost shocking. And like I said, it'll be good food for thought in another show. But the one thing I do want to mention before we begin to talk with Roland a little bit about his chart and how he can use some of these great cycles. One of the things when we say that it's not as strong here doesn't mean it can't be a great year for you. It doesn't mean it's not going to be powerful. What it means is, in a lot of ways, Jupiter represents a lot of idealism, a lot of high ethical and philosophical ideas. These are very much a part of who Jupiter and what this energy represents. And it's certainly time for a lot of that in helping our environment, helping us have certainly a healthy political system, helping people have freedom of speech and religion. All these things are very important and can be connected to Jupiter. The thing that we need to watch out for this year is there can be that challenge for all of us, myself included, in wanting to be very idealistic. And how can we live in everyday reality and still hold high ideals? How can we still hold the light and a spiritual focus? So what we're looking at this year is with Jupiter and Virgo, how can we walk our talk? How can we use these important ideas and put them into action? So with that, that's a little bit of food for thought. I'd like to welcome Roland, and we're going to take a look at a few ways that Jupiter is going to impact his life and his chart this year. And I hope that'll give you something that's a little more real that you can think about.
Okay,
Welcome,
I'm
Roland.
ready for this.
Okay,
Thank you,
Roland.
Amy.
You're
Thank you
so
for having me
welcome.
on your program. And it was kind of unexpected to talk about my chart today, but very anxious to hear a little bit of news and see what's going on.
Good. Thank you, Roland.
Yeah.
So again, this is going to be a brief review of Roland's chart. We're not going to be in heavy detail here. But what I would like to do is look at a few of the places where Roland is going to be impacted by this cycle. Now, Roland happens to be a Virgo. That is his sun sign. But I do want to make the point before we begin this little tiny mini reading, I do want to make the point today that even if you don't have anything in an earth sign in your chart, you will still feel an influence of Jupiter in your life. Now, obviously, I'd have to see your individual chart to know those exact points or those exact cycles. But everything I'm discussing today still will have some impact. Some of it for you will be a little more general because you don't have his exact birth chart, of course. And like I said, I'm certainly not a Virgo, and it still has an influence in my life this year. And the idea is, how can we help you, even in this broadcast, learn some ways that you can take home and begin to apply. Okay, so to begin with, as I mentioned, Roland does have his sun in the sign of Virgo. And also for Roland, he also has Mercury. So he has two, and actually he has Neptune also in the sign of Virgo, which is fine. That's what he has in his birth chart. So we're going to look at that. But what we're also going to look at that's significant for Roland is we're going to look at two other points. One of those is the fact that Roland's moon is in the sign of Sagittarius. And that's what we call a mutable sign. So some of you who aren't astrology students, just bear with me for a minute. But Jupiter in the sign of Virgo is actually what we call a mutable earth sign. So there's different parts of people's lives and their charts. And those of you that might have something mutable in your chart, that could be in Gemini, that could be Virgo, that could be Sagittarius, or it could be Pisces. So if you have anything in your birth chart with any of those signs in it, it just means you also will have a little bit stronger influence this year. So that includes quite a few people at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to see, and actually with Roland, because he was born right at the very beginning of the cycle of Virgo, actually the minute Jupiter was just about entering his sun sign, Roland actually gave me some good news. And we're not going to get into all that on the show, but I already know there's some good things financially beginning to open up. And I'm one of the bigger cheerleaders of him and his wife, because they've just been angels to me over these years. So those doors are starting to open. And I want to look during this little tiny bird's eye view reading we're going to have. I not only want to encourage Roland to take advantage of these cycles, but I also want him to know some of the other things that can occur, because part of what can happen during a Jupiter cycle, Jolly Jupiter's favorite slogan is more is better. And more is even better than that. So for those of us that have certainly been that road, and certainly if you're over 25 or 40, we've all been there many times. And the good or bad news about being over 40 or 45 is that we know more isn't always better. Sometimes more and moderation is a good motto. So we're going to be looking at that a little bit with Roland. So Roland, I'm going to talk with him, and then I'm going to get a question from Roland in between this. But first, I want to give him the bird's eye view. So Roland's first cycle already passed, and he already has some good news. So I know he's encouraged. And his next cycle actually has just finished, which was Jupiter in Virgo. And some of you know that he's been one of the pioneers actually in the Google Hangout series, and been doing a very fascinating series on internet marketing with a very unique approach for 2 years now. So part of that is he's now transitioning and probably moving further along and doing some very interesting web development. So all these are happening. So these 2 cycles have already occurred for him as the cycle began. Now the cycles I want to look at with Roland, he has 2, let's see. He has another cycle that's occurring right now. It's very short. It's for probably another couple of weeks. This is a short cycle, but what's important about this, some of you that know astrology, I'll use the term the North Node. So this has a lot to do with Roland's purpose in life, which he's, I'm sure, always working to help people and always interested in inspiring them, both spiritually and through business, to also be their greatest selves as they bring their message to the world through their web development. So this particular pattern is being enhanced or expanded for the next couple of weeks. And from what I understand, I know Roland's continuing. I know that the YouTube series has begun, the Hangouts on Air have begun on YouTube, actually right during this time. And he's on the forefront, I know, helping with that. So congratulations on that, Roland. So the 2 cycles we're going to look at, because these are a little bit longer and a little more important, just because they are longer. And there's 2 occurring. One of those is, again, which we'll be talking about in future shows, so bear with me, those of you that are a little new to all this. As I mentioned last week, the idea of your actual chart, those 12 houses talk about different areas of your life and your experience. The planets, such as Jupiter, are the actors. The signs, such as Virgo, that's the script. That's what you're thinking about. So we're thinking about money and health and career and our routine. That's the script this year. Jupiter is this very, mighty planet that's bringing the energies. But what's very positive, and I know Roland's going to be happy to hear this while we look at these 2 cycles of his. Jupiter is actually going into the 2nd house, which actually has to do with money and resources and his value and beliefs. So it's actually going into that house, Roland, in late November. It will be there, it looks like, until May. And then in July, it's going to be there for good for the next probably 8 or 10 months, or probably a couple years, actually. I have to look at the chart for a little bit longer. But Jupiter will be there probably for another 10 months. And this is good news for Roland because the second house has a lot to do with his value, his resources. And it is one of the first money houses. So yay for Roland. Things are starting to open up in a new way, and he deserves it, man. He's worked hard and he's helped so many people. So it's nice to deliver a little good news to him. I just found that in his chart today, and I was personally celebrating. Now, the two places that Jupiter also has its influence in Roland's chart, we're going to talk about those briefly. How's my time, Roland? Are we okay?
You're just over the halfway mark, so
okay, we're good.
You probably got another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Solid 10 minutes.
Okay, good. So we're going to do the thumbnail view, and then we're going to get Roland's question. So the thumbnail view is Roland has two cycles, like I said, that are occurring that start later this year, which would be later in December, goes through mid-March, and then the cycle kicks in again in August till mid-September. So no one is going to have a steady, intense influence of Jupiter for the next 12 months. It just, because it moves so quickly, it'll impact a planet anywhere from, let's say, a week, 4 months, and then it'll move along. But during that time, you can still take advantage in between, and you can enhance, like I said, your work and career and these different material aspects. It's just you'll have a stronger influence when it's up close and personal. So these two cycles I want to mention because one of them is personal. It's his moon, and that's why I thought would be interesting to all of you. And then the other one is an outer planet, which is Neptune. But we're going to talk about both because they will be there for quite a while. And what's important about it is the moon is our most personal planet, so it has a lot to do with, you know, how Roland's really deep unconscious feeling about himself and how he relates to people. Remember, Jupiter wants to expand. More is better, remember, is the famous theme. So I happen to know Roland. I'm fortunate to have been a friend and also colleague. And I happen to know how gracious and kind he is as a human. But he's going to definitely have some additional emotional energy and urges to, probably knowing him, he's quite an extrovert. And so I'm going to encourage him as his astrologer to just be aware not to overdo, not to give too much so that he might fatigue himself. He might deplete himself during this time. And I'm going to encourage him to have just some good boundaries on his own time and space because he's going to feel very expansive, which is fantastic. I know it's going to help in many ways expand things for him. But there also can be that, like I said, remember the overreaction can be someone who feels like they're stretched and done too much. Can you relate to that, Roland?
Yeah, I definitely can. And I can relate to the concept that you suggest to kind of like temper the whole situation and not overextend. Because I've been spending years overextending myself. And one of the things that I decided this year is that I'll guide people as best I can, but I really don't have it in my facility to solve everybody's problems and to take care of everybody regardless of budget, for instance. And there are a few people who I've basically had to say, look, unless we can work something out, I'm not your man. However, my best suggestion for you is you can take this route or that route. And I basically want to counsel people as to their best solution, because a lot of people want to solve the biggest problem with the least money. And that's just not the way it happens. You know, that's not the spirit of affluence and abundance. So if I had a question for you, it would basically be, how do people pragmatize their actions past this when they know that they need to temper what's going on, and they have a sense of like that expanding feeling of like, I just got to reach out and grab something big right now because I'm feeling all this energy. What is the move that we do? we're prone to anticipate what's going on, kind of like from a superstitious standpoint. But you know me, I'm not superstitious, and so basically the question is, what do I do? What do I actively pursue in relationship to these star casts and what's going on?
That's okay. So that's a great question. And because I've never been superstitious, to me, this is really a spiritual science, to be honest with you. And because I also know that Roland very much understands a lot of spiritual principles and always reminds me about the power of attraction, the law of attraction. And is such a positive person, what I'm going to say is most important right now is to stay really connected with your heart and not to let your mind drive the show. Jupiter, there's no question, I see, materially things are going to expand for you, I think, in your family. And I think most important right now is how can you increase, to be honest, your health and well-being and your emotional well-being and satisfaction. And the minute you feel in your mind, it's too much, I should do it anyway, the conversation has to stop. And as you put it. So in other words, these energies, as we all know, the stars guide, they don't compel. We all know that. But when doors open, the idea is we want you to go through the doors. And the idea is we still want people to, again, Virgo wants you to have good, healthy routines. So if that means one more thing is too much, then you do less tomorrow. If the idea of all this, I mean, my intention for everyone is really to have good lives so we can contribute and practice good self-care. And if anything, Virgo is about good, healthy routines and habits. And so the second cycle that's happening for Roland during this time, which is more subtle, but it still has influence, is Neptune is one of our outer planets. It has a lot to do with our spirituality, but in a sense of altruism, kindness, and we can tend to give without good boundaries. So this cycle is definitely going to give Roland a little bit of temptation again of thinking about this. And now he's already spoken it. So he's got his friend and astrologer and colleague that's already heard it live today, that this is not a time to give to others in a way that will cause you to suffer. And he's always been very expansive and generous, certainly with me and with many. So the principle then is the idea that as we give, as Roland said, from a place of prosperity, it's supposed to expand for everyone. The idea is not that one person gets limited and everyone else gets to benefit. Does that help at all, Roland?
Absolutely, and it's a good feeling when you say those words. I have a good feeling about them. So the main thing is that when we counsel people to expand their own outreaches and their own experience, that we all benefit and that everybody should benefit. It's not at the cost of something. It's not at the cost of one person so that another person can gain. It's that we should all be in the realm of expansion, and I really like that feeling.
That's to me totally why I want to do this show. I'm totally interested in everyone being able to take some information from this that they can use when they hang up and literally use that to expand their joy, their spiritual connection, a new opportunity for prosperity they hadn't thought of. And I'll say the other thing that's important to me during this cycle, not just with Roland, but with all of us, is I think improving our health, not in a sense of fanaticism, but in a sense of when all of us are healthy in spirit, mind, and body, we are able to make a great contribution. We're able to receive from those that want to give back to us. And although this is not a flashy cycle by any means, it can be one in which you can build a wonderful foundation. As we all know, things are heating up on the planet. Things are not simple right now. And I feel the more grounded we are, that we can be in a better position then to not only prosper, but as we have, like I said, better perception and health and clarity, think of how much more benefit we can be in the community and in our business and with our loved ones. Do you have another question, Roland, before I begin to summarize what we've done today?
No, I think we better stick to the summary, because if we get into my sign any deeper, we're going to be doubling our show length. So
right. We
go
won't
ahead.
do that today. We won't do that today. So in summary, I'm so happy everyone came today. I know today's show had a little different flavor, and we will be expanding some of these themes in the future. But I do want to emphasize the idea. Please, by all means, celebrate your abundance, celebrate those areas where the doors are going to open. But I do encourage you to remember more is not better, that enjoy the expansion, and remember, like a good accordion, to come back to the middle. So you can integrate that wonderful expansion and those new opportunities and blessings that come to you. Keep things simple. And please remember that when you have a spiritual focus on being of service and benefit, then your material life gets well grounded and integrated. And please remember about the good communication, that it's also important to speak to those around you who may not be having all the expansion and communicate with them so they know where you are. Maintain that balance, and it could be just a really tremendous year of growth and expansion for you. So I'm just, again, so delighted that you all joined me. And just as a humorous note, during one of our shows last week on Mercury retrograde, I discovered that my website had taken a trip to Mexico permanently, and unfortunately can't get back across the border. The data is all corrupt. So thanks to Roland and his generosity, I'm going to have a new website up before Christmas. And in the meantime, I want to invite you to email me at amy@astrocoachamy.com. Any questions, comments, new show ideas, I would love to hear from you. And if you see this wonderful poster over here, you can see my cell is up there. If you'd like to text me, you're welcome to call. My cell number is 949-235-9793 here in sunny Southern California. Free to subscribe to the show. We'd love to have you. And I'm delighted you're here. So thank you, Roland. Thank you for being with us and for your generosity. And I wish everybody a fantastic Jupiter and Virgo cycle.